What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Studs and Duds Week. For those that might be new to this series or just need a little bit of a reminder, Studs and Duds is one of my original series. It is a comprehensive NFL player review series, and this goes all the way back to 2016 when I first started my channel. You may or may not know this channel actually got its start as a Madden channel. And while I no longer do Madden stuff on this channel, though when I have time, I do stream on Twitch and do rebuilds on my other YouTube channel, TFG Plays, if you want to go check that out. But while there's no more Madden on this channel, I do still make my own custom community roster where I edit all of the ratings to be what I consider more realistic, more accurate. As we know, EA's ratings can be a bit wacky. And then through the lens of Studs and Duds, I'm able to talk about all of the changes I made, why I made those changes, and while we're looking at this through the lens of those Madden ratings, it does show how I perceive these players in real life, and it actually gives us a really cool way to look at all of the rising and falling players around the league. So that is what Studs and Duds is all about. And as I set out for this season, this series is going to be coming in trimesters this year. So this is obviously our first trimester after week 7. Then we will have another wave of Studs and Duds either after week 13 or 14, depending on my schedule. I'll have to let you guys know in the future what week that will be. And then at the very end of the season as well. And in those weeks, I won't have time for my regular scheduled content like the power rankings or the weekly recap episodes of the Fully Inflated Football podcast. If you were wondering where those were at this week, won't be there this week. We'll be back at it next week. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I do ask if you guys could please take just a second to hit that like button. This series does take a ton of work and definitely tends to be the least rewarding in terms of views and monetization. So if everyone watching this could hit that like button, that might change and I would really appreciate it. It takes just a second, so let's get those like numbers up. It really does help. But now let's go ahead and get started. And we will begin the NFC East episode here with the Washington Commanders. And this has to be the longest list of players on any individual episode of Studs and Duds we've ever had. What the Washington Commanders are accomplishing this year relative to where I viewed this roster, as we're obviously talking about the roster here, but where I viewed their team and what they were going to, how many wins they were going to have, the success they were going to have this year. It's up there in terms of surprise teams since I've been doing this. So they're doing some really special stuff. We got a lot to talk about here. Let's get started. Obviously, the super stud is Jayden Daniels. This is all surrounding him. Like a lot of stuff is working here, but Jayden Daniels is the heartbeat of it all. And I was just so wrong on how good of a player he was going to be out the gate. He's having... it sucks that he got hurt because he's really having one of the best rookie seasons a quarterback has ever had. And, the running's great. The deep ball's great. The pocket movement and the scrambling ability, the designed running impact, that's all great. We kind of knew that stuff was going to be there. But how quickly he's improved upon things that were areas of weakness in college, things like throwing with anticipation over the middle of the field, just reading out the middle of the field, period. And his ability to recognize and attack the blitz, those were all things I had questions about him based on his LSU tape. And the ability for him to come here into the NFL and make those not just non-weaknesses, but legitimate strengths. He's one of the best quarterbacks against the blitz already as a rookie. That's just unheard of. And the majority of his throws are over the middle of the field. That's a big part of Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is he asks these guys to read out those high-lows over the middle of the field, and Daniels is doing that. It just blows me away. And he gets a +10 here for Studs and Duds. I'm not sure I've ever had that. He really has just been so overwhelmingly fantastic. And it sucks that I don't know if he's going to play here against Caleb Williams and the Bears, because that was going to be one of the highlight moments of the season. And even if he does play, is he going to be 100%? I don't know, but that's another conversation for a different video. He has been truly, truly superb. But let's get into the rest of this roster. I had to make 2 pages for Washington. I've certainly never done that. I could have just made the text smaller, I suppose, but These guys deserve to be discussed. Even Marcus Mariota is playing well in this situation. Granted, it was against the Carolina Panthers. Good Lord, it would have been crazy to see what Jaden would have done in that game. But, just playing with confidence, like making some throws you just haven't seen from him, throwing the ball accurately, taking care of the ball. I mean, one game, he's getting a +2 for it, but it really was a nice performance against Carolina. But all three of these running backs have been super impressive for what I certainly thought about him coming into the year. And I like Brian Robinson. I do. I've kind of, I was kind of pounding the table for him as a good fantasy football pick in the Commanders deep dive. But even then, I didn't quite see him being this efficient. Again, a guy that got banged up recently. Hopefully he can get back out there. But he's big, he's strong and runs with power and good vision and all that stuff. But he's just a very underrated speed guy. Like when they get him on the perimeter, he breaks a lot of angles because guys see how big he is, and at first he's not always moving that fast. It's very similar to Derrick Henry in that way, where guys will kind of, come in short, and then he just continues to accelerate and wins that angle. And you get some big breakaway runs from him too, in addition to the good goal line stuff, the short yardage, just the bruising ability that he has. So he's going up 3 to an 81. And then Austin Eckler as well. He just looks spry and back, basically. I mean, last year was tough to watch. He legitimately looked slow for the Chargers. Last year, it's not the case. So he's been the perfect complement to Brian Robinson. And then Jeremy McNichols has come in. What is this, like year 7 for McNichols out of Boise State? Once upon a time was kind of a sleeper, like a fantasy football sleeper, a fun player out of Boise State. Teams produced some running backs in their days, and about to have another really good one. Yeah, dude, McNichols, like the eye test on him is insane. He's only gotten a handful of carries, so there's only so far up he can go. But like he's had just some insane runs, dude, like breaking tackles, exploding into holes, like just really looking the part. So they've got 3 backs doing it. These wide receivers are stepping up too. Noah Brown has been just the most necessary addition this team could have made. You knew looking at that Houston depth chart, they were going to have to let somebody go because they had like 7 capable receivers. Noah Brown was the odd man out there. And man, he's been super reliable when they've needed him. And he's shown a little bit more like separation ability and route running ability. It really looks like to me like he looked at Nico Collins, a similar body type. Nico's a much better athlete than Noah Brown, but sitting behind Nico Collins last year, it felt like he really studied a lot of the stuff that Nico was doing, especially on these in-breakers, posts, and digs and stuff, to really set up those route breaks and create those push-offs at the top of his route. And you've seen some explosive separation ability from Noah Brown in a way that you haven't before. He's always been a guy that wins tough catches, but he's never really been much of a separator. He's taken a little bit of a step up in that way. So he's been a really nice addition. Our guy, Diami Brown, love seeing him get this opportunity. He really is a good fit with Jaden Daniels because Diami Brown has always been a really good ball tracker, deep threat, making those tough catches down the field. The over-the-shoulder kind of Willie Mays ability, if you will, has always been there. It's still just kind of ramping up. His target share, I think, could go north. I really think he's a good fit in this offense because those deep balls are some of the best things Jaden has to his game. So just a +1 here for Diami Brown, but deserves it. And then Luke McCaffrey is going to get a +1. He's playing and catching the ball when it's thrown his way. Look, Luke McCaffrey, I question this pick as a 3rd rounder, and he still just doesn't really pass the eye test. Obviously, he gets a little credit for what he's doing right now. He's still 68 overall, though, and is losing some snaps here. Zacchaeus has been out there more. Diami Brown's been out there more. To me, it always felt like they were kind of forcing their guy, the 3rd-round pick, out there a little bit early. He's had some moments like showing some craftiness to sit down in zones, and his best play came against the Bengals where it was play extension, and he kind of reacted with Jaden Daniels on a scramble. So he's got the headiness for sure, former quarterback and all that, but I just don't see the juice. I don't see a guy that can beat man coverage. He really hasn't done anything spectacular with the ball in his hands, so Yeah, it's just kind of where I'm at with Luke McCaffrey. He's been okay. But then Zach Ertz has had a mini resurgence here. Another guy, like, really no dynamism there, but he's been reliable and available in a pinch in some big spots for Jaden. But then, honestly, like, I wish I could also make the offensive line the super stud of this team. It obviously had to be Jaden Daniels, but I think this is the other part of why Washington's been so surprising. You know, coaching's been good. Some of these other spots deserve their pockets of credit as well, of course. But the other massive wrinkle here is this offensive line was supposed to be booty cheeks, and they've actually been one of the best offensive lines in the league through 8 weeks. And it's everybody. Everybody is stepping up, and everybody's going up here in studs and duds, with the exception of Andrew Wiley at right tackle, he's been fine. He hasn't been a liability. That's who Andrew Wiley is. He's a solid right tackle. Eventually, they're probably going to want to upgrade that spot, but it's not like he's having a bad year for his standards or anything like that. But at left tackle, Cornelius Lucas, at 33 years old, I mean, he's always played well when he's gotten opportunities. I don't know why the NFL has basically ignored him for 10 years, because he was a good backup in Chicago to Charles Leno, and then ends up stuck behind Charles Leno again here in Washington, ironically. But he's had spot starts. He's been basically the best swing tackle in the league for 10 years. Washington comes into the year. They're like, all right, well, we got Cornelius Lucas we feel pretty good about. And then they draft Brandon Coleman in the 3rd round, who they're obviously trying to play. We'll talk about him in a second. But Cornelius Lucas, to me, seems like he's taking this opportunity as an FU at 33 years old to say, yeah, I'm a starter in the league, and I've still got it. He's having an absolute career year. He's really establishing himself as a quality starting left tackle. He's been good in both phases, but really dominant as a pass protector. He's 6'8", 330 pounds, too. It's not like this is some traits list, rando. Like, he looks the part. So I've never really understood it with Cornelius Lucas, why he's never gotten this opportunity, but it's really fun, even at 33 years old, to see him doing this. And it's just another example of, like, an offensive lineman into their 30s, like, only getting better. We saw it with another former commander in Morgan Moses. Trent Williams, seems like he's getting better with age. Like, it just modern sports medicine is really special. I'll just leave it at that. But Brandon Coleman is playing. It's just been really, really up and down. I'm curious if at some point they're going to make a decision, like, we're just going to go with Lucas for the rest of the year, because he's clearly better than Coleman. Like, even Commanders fans obsessed with Brandon Coleman would have to admit that. I don't know. He's been a good run blocker. That's not a huge surprise. He's a good athlete. He's 6'6", 320. But, the pass protection, he's had a couple of good moments, but they've really only come against Arizona and Carolina, who are by far the worst edge rushing teams in the league. So you're really not going against anybody there. When he's had to face Cleveland and the Giants and Tampa, Baltimore, like, he's given up a lot more pressures. So it's not that he's been, like, a complete disaster. He's getting a +1 here. But I do think, it's been nice to get him some playing time, but for Washington's sake, I think it's probably best to roll the rest of the year with Cornelius Lucas, because they really have a shot at winning this NFC East. You're going to have some games now against Micah Parsons and the Eagles, and the Giants got some guys. The Giants gave Coleman fits out the gate. So, we'll see where that situation goes. But at right guard, Sam Cosmi just continues to very quickly climb the offensive guard ranks. I said coming into the year, I was like, he's in the convo for who the best guards in the league are. And I still don't know that I would pick him over the top guards, but he really is up there. And you got to remember, this is only his 2nd season as a guard. He came into the league as a tackle, and his pass protection and consistency has been even better than it was last season. So the arrow, I think, is still pointing up on Cosmi. I said in the Commanders deep dive, I was like, Commanders fans and NFL diehards know about Sam Cosmi, but this is a guy that's going to get one of those top-of-the-market guard deals, and people are going to be like, why the hell did Sam Cosmi get all that money? And the Commanders actually came in under the market because Cosmi had only played guard for a year. They bet on him to continue to get better, and he's looking like a discount at this point. I mean, he costs $3 million less than the top guards, and I would take Sam Cosmi over like Robert Hunt or Landon Dickerson for the Eagles. Those guys are really good players in their own right, but I think Cosmi is a more complete player, a more balanced player than those guys. You can really run any run scheme with him because he's a good enough athlete to block wide zone. You can pull him. You can create drive off the line, and he's just a really freaking solid pass protector, man. I mean, the tackle background definitely shows in his footwork and his hands. So he deserves some credit here. But then Nick Allegretti at left guard, a really fun story, man. He's established himself as a quality starting guard, especially as a pass protector. He's just really refined in that regard. And coming out of college, Allegretti was like the second most efficient pass blocking grade in that rookie class. Like, he's been doing this for a while going back to college. But he obviously, he's just a really fun story. He came into the league 6th round by the Chiefs, maybe even 7th round. And he was like forced into action, really some of his first playing time in that Super Bowl against the Bucs, where the Chiefs offensive line was infamously bad. He struggled in that game. But he keeps on the roster spot. He keeps developing, keeps working at it. And again, in last year's season for the Chiefs, he had to step in the playoffs when Joe Thuney went down, and he played great. And that really earned him this opportunity with Washington, and he hasn't looked back since. I think the arrow is actually still pointing up for him. Even if he is 27, 28 years old, he's really settling in as a wonderful pickup by this Commanders front office. As is Tyler Biadasz. He's actually having a career year as well. Just the pass protection. He's just not getting beat. That's why Dallas let him go. He's a solid player, but he just wasn't like super efficient is really what it came down to. He would take a couple losses every week, and it's just not happening in Washington. He's one of the highest graded pass blocking centers in the league this year. So everything's working for this offense. Obviously, it's just been incredibly tremendous. And we didn't even mention Terry McLaurin, by the way. I didn't feel the need to bump him up because I've never really reduced Terry McLaurin. He's always passed the eye test. I just wanted to throw him on the notes because I know Commanders fans are going to be like, hey, what about Terry? Isn't he going up? I'm like, no, I've got him rated as a top 10 wide receiver. I think that's very much fair. It's just he actually has a quarterback to throw him the football now. So I did at least want to mention that. But yeah, let's go to page number 2 for the defense. There's less to talk about with the defense. They have struggled on that side of the ball much more as we expected. It's more been the offense compensating for that. But they have played a little bit better as of late. And there's still some stuff to talk about here. Not all good. But we'll start on the edge with Dorrance Armstrong. This was this team's kind of big financial investment in the offseason. This edge group was such a joke after they traded away Sweat and Chase Young last year. And they were really banking on Dorrance Armstrong to be like kind of a Trey Hendrickson type of signing where he was an edge number 3, never really got the starting opportunity, but you like the tape. You're hoping you give him a starting opportunity and he can really emerge as that dude. And early returns are pretty good. He has 20 pressures and 4 sacks in his first 6 games. And those are obviously really good numbers. Now, he's getting credit here. He's getting a +2. Things are, looking up for this signing. Like, I'm not trying to talk down on this. I just want to point out that 11 of those 20 pressures and 3 of those 4 sacks did come against backup tackles against Arizona and Cleveland, guys that have really struggled. So just like take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But again, a +2 here, heading much more towards being at least a number 2 for them. I'm not going to come out here and say Dorrance Armstrong is going to be Trey Hendrickson, but can he continue to play at a good level and return what they're paying him? Yeah, absolutely. Based on how he's played right now, he's shown some good stuff as a pass rusher, no doubt. And then Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a 7th round rookie who's given them some really scrappy reps on early downs. I was not a fan of Jean-Baptiste, and to be fair, he really is bringing nothing as a pass rusher, which is why I didn't like him. He definitely was a high-effort run defender at Notre Dame, but he's come in and been an impact in the league and has been a more efficient run defender out the gate than I anticipated. So he's getting a little bit of love here for what he's doing for them. Now, perhaps the funniest thing about this whole Commanders thing is what would we have said about the Commanders, is their strength heading into the year? What's the one good thing on this roster? The interior defensive line, right? And outside of the secondary, the interior D-line has been maybe the worst unit on this Commanders team. They really are not getting anything from these big names. And Jonathan Allen actually needs to continue to come down. He fell a lot last year, just didn't really look the part last year. Kind of looked like he had checked out at the end of the year a little bit. Well, he doesn't have that excuse anymore, right? Like, everybody's bought in here, and Jonathan Allen continues to have like a very mediocre pressure rate. He continues to really not show up against the run, frankly. And it's just weird. He's a guy we really thought was a blue chip player for this team. He's 29, so it's not like he's 35. So it's just kind of weird that he's really disappeared from the spotlight on this team. And like, it's at a point where I don't even know if he has like trade value for Washington. So yeah, he continues to fall, still getting a lot of respect for what he accomplished in, 2019 to 2022, where he really was one of the premium interior D linemen in the league. So yeah, there's that. But it's not just him. Daron Payne's been pretty solid. We'll give him that. But the other guy, Johnny Jer'Zhan Newton, I don't want to lower him because I know he got injured or went into the draft with an injury. It was kind of a tough situation there. I don't want to lower him quite yet because he might be battling through this hurt, and that would obviously slow him down. But he's been terrible. He has 2 pressures on 60-something pass rush snaps, and he's been as bad against the run as you could have feared on him. That was always going to be a question on him because he's an undersized defensive tackle. But, this was a lot of people's my guy, and for good reason. Like, his pass rushing tape at Illinois is insane, and I thought this was a slam dunk pick when they made it. I thought it was really weird that he fell into the second round. I think the injury stuff shed some light on that. So I'm not quite ready to lower Johnny Newton because I know it's in there, but he's really been, frankly, a liability for Washington. So we'll keep tabs on that. But I don't have too much to say about the linebackers in terms of player movement. I think Luvu and Wagner have been as advertised. So I'll just float that out there. I didn't need to change their ratings, but they are playing well for this team. And then into the secondary, Mike Sainristil is going up, the rookie second-round pick out of Michigan, playing in the slot. He's just been kind of all over the field in terms of coverage, especially the last 2 weeks, been very sticky, but he's doing a really good job, like what you ask of your slot corner, especially in what's been a pretty zone-heavy defense here for Washington, at least more so than some of Dan Quinn's Cowboys defenses, but just kind of keeping everything in front of him, finishing tackles, just really looking the part as a slot corner. He's a really high floor, nice pick that they made. Kind of had an interception fall into his lap against Baltimore, but his overall coverage has been really good. So yeah, he's going up. And then Noah Igbenogany, he's kind of earned this starting opportunity. He's keeping Emmanuel Forbes off the field, this team's first-round pick from last year. Igbenogany's really interesting still because he was like unbelievably young. I think he might have been 19 years old when he got drafted. If not, he like turned 20 on draft day. So he's in his 5th year. He's been a first-round bust. He's bounced around the league now. This is his 3rd team, but he follows Dan Quinn here to Washington. He's only 25 years old. Like, and he's a freak athlete. So if he's starting to put things together, that's really exciting for Washington. That's how you kind of compensate for the Emmanuel Forbes whiff. But he's not fully there. He's had his ups and downs as he has in his career, but he's had some really good moments in coverage. I would still say he's probably been more of a liability than a strength. I don't want to oversell this, but he was obviously rated very low, down at a 68. Like, he's at least shown to be a streaky, adequate corner, which is more than they've had. So again, I don't want to oversell it, but he's been all right, going +2. And then into the safety room, Jeremy Chinn's going to go up +1, looking a little bit more like the guy we remember in Carolina. Not all the way there, but he's playing a lot. He's been a pretty solid run defender, decent in coverage, kind of playing that big safety role that Jermaine Kearse role in Dan Quinn's defense. It's a very natural fit for Jeremy Chinn, so it makes sense that he's playing pretty well there. I could see him to continue to get really comfortable there and kind of reemerge as a nice player there. But Quan Martin as well, playing a lot of deep safety for this team. The coverage side of things is still coming along for him. He's been moved all over the place. But from a run defense perspective, he's flying to the ball. He's finishing his tackles, showing up in that regard. So he's creeping up a little bit. I do want to at least mention they're not playing Derek Forrest, who I would consider to be their best safety. Look, I'm not here to question Dan Quinn. I think he's doing a very good job with this team, but Percy Butler is just not good. So I'm very confused why Derek Forrest is not playing. And if you're not going to play him, put him on the trade block. Like, he's a good young player, and it sucks for him because this is the last year of his rookie contract. Like, this is his opportunity to get his money. So that one kind of bothered me. I just wanted to at least bring that up. But then the last thing here for Washington is the kicker, Austin Seibert. It's been a just much needed pickup for this team. They kind of had the Brandon McManus situation with the sexual harassment accusation. They end up releasing him after they traded for him from Jacksonville. They bring in Cade York. He sucks week one. They pick up Austin Seibert, and he's been very solid. Really just the one. He missed a big 50-yard field goal against Baltimore. But that's, I think, the only miss he has all year. So he's been a nice acquisition for Washington. All right, we got through it. Obviously, a monster season for Washington, and I can imagine when the next Studs and Duds rolls around, it's going to be a lot more of the same. But then next we have the Dallas Cowboys, and this is just a Washington Commanders dream come true. We just spent 25, 30 minutes glazing them up, and now we're going to be talking about the Dallas Cowboys downfall in a year where things are just not going in the right direction, right? We will start on a positive note. I'm pretty sure this is the first and only time that a kicker will be the team's star of the month or the super stud. It's really just for the lack of a better choice, but to be fair, Brandon Aubrey is insane. I mean, he's overtaken Justin Tucker as the best kicker in the league. How long has it been since it's just been a lock where it's Justin Tucker and everybody else? Aubrey's just better. I mean, Tucker's been missing a lot of kicks too, but this dude's insane. And what a story where he's off the couch into the league within a couple years. There's not really much else to say. We've all seen this dude sinking 64-yard dimes right down the pipe. But he's really fun. But let's go to the offense that has just not been what we've gotten used to here in Dallas. There's a lot of guys trending down. We'll start with the running backs. Zeke looks like double washed. I was actually somewhat optimistic that he would be okay here in Dallas. But he's averaging 3 yards a touch and just looks even slower than he has in recent years. He actually was okay in New England last year, but he just hasn't been able to get even back to that level. So his touches are fading for sure. Rico Dowdle is the one getting the majority of the touches. He's not explosive. He doesn't have a single run over 15 yards this year, just 5 runs over 10 yards. But he's getting what's blocked up with adequate vision, I suppose. Really, the main reason he's going up is what he's done in the receiving game. He's caught some nice balls, done some nice stuff after the catch. So +2 for Dowdle for whatever that's worth. Obviously, you still wish they had some more dynamism at running back. Could this be a good Travis Etienne or even a Khalil Herbert team to try to get something more out of this run game? Because they're really getting the bare minimum right now. But obviously, the passing game's had their struggles too. And to be completely honest, CeeDee Lamb is not free of blame here. I'm actually going to drop him down 1. And I know he's drawn double teams and, he's all they have and all that. But that was the case last year too. And he was an offensive player of the year type of candidate in a year where we had a bunch of crazy wide receiver production types of seasons. But he just is nowhere near what he was last year. Through 6 games, he already has half as many drops as he had all of last year, including the playoffs. But last year, he converted 73.1% of his targets. This year, all the way down to 61.5. This is nothing drastic. He's still phenomenal. We've still seen some of the highlight reels. I can't remember who it was against, but when he caught the ball on the sideline, juked back inside for a huge touchdown, he's still phenomenal. He's still the 4th or 5th best receiver in the NFL. So I don't want to oversell this as he sucks, but he definitely is not quite at the level he was at last year. And without him playing at that level, you're seeing the inefficiencies with this offense. But Brandon Cooks, it's definitely starting to feel like the beginning of the end for him. 31 years old. if you look at his like yards per route run and just kind of like his receiving grades per PFF and just his overall production, the last 4 years, it's been like steadily declining. And, this is a guy that's always won with his speed above all. And losing that speed, he doesn't have incredible route running or great run after catch ability or the size to compensate for it in other ways. And you're seeing that this year. He's been more tightly covered. His targets have been more contested, and he's really struggling to come down with those. He's also injured right now. So, they were hoping maybe they could squeeze one more year of a wide receiver 2 season out of Brandon Cooks. I'm not sure he's even a wide receiver 3 at this point in time. Based on how he played this season, I think he can potentially be better than how he's played for the first few weeks where he was just horrible. But yeah, it's not looking good for him. Jalen Tolbert has played okay. He's getting a decent amount of targets. He's been really good coming down with tough contested catches, and Dak he desperately needs someone he can trust in those situations. He's always had that guy, Dez, Michael Gallup. He is a guy that on a big third down, when he's under pressure, he wants a bigger bodied wide receiver that can go make a play. And, it hasn't been sensational or anything, but Tolbert's been pretty solid. He's converted 5 out of 8 of those contested catches and deserves to go up here. But again, he's not a huge separator, this dynamic player that can, survive as a wide receiver 2 for this team, which they're asking him to be. And then as we go to the offensive line, they've had their issues here too. Tyler Guyton, the rookie. This is why overreacting in the preseason is so ridiculous. Cowboys fans crown Tyler Guyton as a gem and a first round draft hit. And basically since the season's started, he's been really tough to watch. Damn near benchable in my opinion. He's got to come down from a 68 to a 67. I was already low on him coming into the league. Not that he doesn't have potential or can't eventually get there, but he was just so inconsistent in college. When he wins, it's beautiful because he's got the traits, and when things click, it all comes together, obviously. But just one play, his feet stop moving. One play, he misses with his hands. One play is just getting annihilated by the bull rush. It's been all over the place in the NFL, and the run blocking hasn't been that great either from him. So he's really struggling, had to come down. And then it's bad for the Cowboys when Zach Martin isn't Zach Martin anymore. He had a PFF pass block grade of 0 against the Detroit Lions. Ali McNeil ate his lunch. He hasn't been that bad all year, obviously. He's still a very good player, but we are talking about a Hall of Fame talent that has been steadily declining in the last few years. We're talking about a 34-year-old guard. So he has been incrementally coming down throughout these studs and duds the last couple of years. But this year definitely feels like a steeper drop than we've seen. And when he's not someone you can count on, and he's losing one-on-one reps at the rate he is losing them right now, it's like everything is just crumbles underneath that, because even when they've had their struggles, they've been able to count on him. Not so much this year. And then Terrence Steele, the right tackle, he's been just fine as a run blocker. He's very good at that. But, God, he is such a liability in pass protection. And, obviously all of these guys struggling in the way that they are, it's just tough for Dak to do a whole lot back there. And that's why I'm not changing Dak. I think he's pressing a little bit, which you don't love to see. If he continues to make mistakes and really struggles as the year goes on, I might lower him a little bit. But to me, this is, and I'm not some huge Dak defender, but I don't watch Dak and feel like his process or his accuracy or too much about what he's doing is changing. I think it's just, this is really a bad spot for him to be in right now. They have no run game, no pass protection. The receivers are really struggling. CeeDee Lamb's not playing like CeeDee Lamb. It's just they're in a bad spot. But hey, Hunter Lepke, one more positive. He's pretty sweet for a fullback, utility fullback. He's actually played some tight end. He's got good hands. He's actually been one of their best playmakers this year, which is so sad. But we'll give him some love. And then just a note on Cooper Beebe. He is actually playing pretty well. It's been very much like a roller coaster season in terms of pass protection, which isn't a huge surprise for a rookie center, a guy that can moving from guard to center. But he has been a very good run blocker, and he's not changing in overall, because this is a guy I was super high on. He was a top 50 player in the draft for me, and kind of called him a shot that he was going to end up winning the center job when he wasn't even listed as a center coming into the league. So I didn't have to change him. It's not like he's having a monster season or anything, but he's playing pretty well for a rookie. and I wanted to give him a shout out at least. And then we have some movement on the defense as well. They've obviously just had so many injuries that it's hard to even get a full evaluation of this defense. But one thing is clear is that the spine of this defense is terrible, absolutely terrible. Any team with any semblance of a run game has had their way with the Dallas Cowboys, and it starts up front in the middle. I mean, Mazi Smith has like scammed the NFL, apparently. I can't explain it. I loved his tape at Michigan. Obviously, so many people did. The Cowboys did. He went in the first round. He had some of the best block shedding ability with his quick feet, the historic 3-cone stuff for a defensive tackle. His size, like just the success he had at Michigan. Like I felt like he was one of the highest floor players in that draft class to at least be a good run defender, and then maybe some pass rush stuff could come out. I mean, did he just take his millions and run? I don't know. This is now 2 different systems. He's changed body weights. Whatever way you slice it, he has been just a turnstile at defensive tackle, and you can't have that. He gets no push, loses ground, can't get off blocks, misses tackles. It's just been so bad. It's really, really sad to see. But then Linval Joseph, too, they bring him in right before the season starts, probably because they weren't impressed with what Mazi was doing. And, I mean, he's 35 years old. We know Linval can have an individual good rep here or there, probably still can, but he hasn't really had them this year. He's been getting ran right past all year long. He's had some good pass rushes. For me, it seems kind of like he's come in, he's like, this isn't my team. I'm collecting a paycheck. I'm going to have some fun rushing the passer. He's not doing anything against the run. They're going right up the middle against this team. And then once they get into the second level, the linebackers are really struggling. Now, Demarion Overshown is going to go up here because he has done some stuff in terms of coverage and the blitzing and running sideline to sideline, showing off the speed. So if you're talking about like the Madden roster here, he's going up in the sense of pursuit and coverage and awareness and stuff like that. But he also simultaneously kind of needs to get benched, at least in the way that they're asking, in terms of what they're asking him to do. They've had some injuries at linebacker, and he's just been playing middle linebacker, and he can't do that, especially behind a defensive line that's getting gashed like this. He is a tiny linebacker. He is more safety than he is linebacker, and he just can't handle that type of stuff. So there are a lot of areas of his game that he is not playing well. He kind of realistically should be more in the role that like Marquise Bell played for this team last year, or what Jaron Kearse has played at times, where he's a dime linebacker. If you're in a base 4-3, can come in as a weak side backer, or if you had a really good D-line and a bigger linebacker next to him, you might be able to get away with him as your LB2. But again, while he's going up in rating and has done some nice stuff sideline to sideline and showing off the range and coverage, there are some serious deficiencies in his game as well. And then into the third level, Donovan Wilson's having a really rough year. He's always been just kind of a mainstay in that secondary, just a stable safety, and he hasn't even been that. He's got a bunch of missed tackles this year. He's done effectively nothing in coverage as well. He's also 30 years old. So like this defense is beat up. They're demoralized because they can't stop the run, and they're getting older too. So it's just really sucks for the Cowboys, but this needed to happen, and I hope they can turn it around. Big test this weekend against San Francisco. But let's talk about Philadelphia. They've been a little bit more polarizing. They definitely have some more positives to talk about. We'll start with the super stud. It's got to be Saquon Barkley. I mean, just what a fun signing. It reminds me so much of the 49ers getting Christian McCaffrey, where he kind of comes home. Christian McCaffrey played at Stanford. Saquon played at Penn State. I know Saquon's also from Jersey, so it's not that he didn't look good in a Giants jersey too, Giants fans, but he does look really good in an Eagles jersey, and it just feels like the right fit where he, just like Christian McCaffrey, got out from a bad situation, landed in a good one, and is just having fun, balling out. I mean, he is their entire offense right now, him and A.J. Brown, now that Brown's back. But Saquon especially is really sheltering a lot of issues that this offense is having. They barely threw the ball against the Giants and just leaned into Saquon Barkley, who had a career day against New York, his former team. But yeah, I mean, he's been phenomenal. You kind of knew it was going to happen coming here, but it still is really fun to see. He's running with a ton of power too. He's made some really nice catches. Just kind of doing it all for this team. So we'll start on a positive note with him. But next up, I am going to lower Jalen Hurts. -3, 83 to an 80. It's a pretty significant drop for a quarterback. But to be clear on that, a lot of this goes back to last season. I could have lowered him more last year when he really started to have these struggles, but I wanted to kind of wait because I knew he was dealing with this kind of suspicious leg injury. They weren't very clear of what's going on, but he was clearly slowed down, wasn't the player he had been in 2022 when he was so dynamic with his feet, an MVP candidate, gets the big contract, all that. So that's baked in here. It's been another year where he just is not as explosive. And to see that type of physical regression so quickly at 26 years old is really discouraging for the Eagles because that was such a big selling point on the contract. Was they had to have known he had his flaws as a passer. And I made that whole Jalen Hurts video. I've talked about a lot of these points, but I think they figured, okay, 3-4 years from now, we're hoping that development can come as they move to more of a pro-style offense. But they felt like, at least in the first few years, they could lean on the legs and what it would bring to the run game with the numbers advantage and what he can create and how he can create with his legs as a scrambler to make up for some of his shortcomings as a passer. And that's fallen off so quickly. So that's a big part of why he's falling here. But you kind of piggyback off of what I just said. He's just not grasping the pro-style offense here that they wanted to shift towards. And you can complain about Kellen Moore's play calling. I think that's fine. I've cooled off on Kellen Moore, Eagles fans. I have. I think he's fine. I think he still probably gets a little too much hate, but he certainly isn't a great offensive coordinator, and they could be doing more to mix things up and make some easier reads for Jalen Hurts beyond the stuff that he's really good at, right? Slants and go balls. They've really leaned into that. And if we're going off the rails a little bit, I think that's not all a bad thing, that the offense wasn't working and Kellen Moore simplified things and said, all right, well, we're going to run the ball. We're going to go slants. We're going to go balls because that's what Jalen Hurts is good at. I don't think that's all a bad thing. But back to the main point here. You watch the tape the first few weeks, he was not able to pick defenses apart from the pocket. He was not able to be their version of Dak Prescott. That's really what they wanted. They made that very clear, all offseason, talking about him making pre-snap checks, hiring Kellen Moore, who worked with Dak. That was the vision here. And Jalen Hurts, that's not his game. But the thing is, that's going to kind of have to be his game if the legs aren't what they were. So you're really in this dilemma here. And he's in a tough spot. He doesn't suck. He still throws a great deep ball. He's done a better job avoiding mistakes as of late. He still has decent athleticism to be a factor in the run game, but he's not dynamic like he was. So, he's okay. They're winning games with him, but is not a difference maker at quarterback right now. And it's to be determined if he can unlock another aspect of his game to get back to being a tier 2 quarterback, really is kind of what he was off the heels of the Super Bowl run because of his legs, giving him an elite trait as a quarterback. He does nothing elite about him as a quarterback right now, and he's just kind of another guy right now. So that needs to be reflected here in the ratings. And if you want to see a little bit more film backing on that and a little bit deeper dive into his struggles, I have the whole Jalen Hurts video out there for you. Or you can just call me a hater and say I'm wrong. That's fine too. But on top of that, A.J. Brown has come back into the lineup and reminded us just how different this team is with him. He's such a core aspect of their entire passing game because I do think it has to be oversimplified with Jalen Hurts right now. And when you have a wide receiver who might not, he definitely is not as diversified as Justin Jefferson or Tyreek Hill or many other wide receivers in the league. There's a lot of great wide receivers, but there is not a wide receiver as dominant at the two routes that he runs. slants and go balls. And I just don't think it's that bad of a thing that they've simplified this thing and said, you know what? A.J. Brown is 230 pounds. He's fast as shit. He catches everything. Teams can't cover him one-on-one. And the fact that this offense looks so much better when he's out there and when he's not, it's really an indictment on the entire thing and a huge compliment to how freaking unstoppable A.J. Brown is. In 3 games this year, he has 324 yards and 3 touchdowns. He is unbelievably good. And you don't need me to tell you how good he is, but it is crazy just how essential he is for this team to look somewhat competent offensively. Now, Jahan Dotson, not so competent. I don't really know what happened. I don't know if his focus just disappeared or if he lost all his confidence or what. But the guy that was playing at Penn State is far and gone. And what did the Commanders get for Dotson? Like a 3rd-round pick? I think it was. I mean, we praise Howie Roseman all the time, but that trade was kind of like, I mean, I don't know. Like, is Jalen Hurts really a guy that's going to progress from A.J. Brown all the way through Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and actually involve Jahan Dotson anyway? That always felt unnecessary. But even in a vacuum, I don't know if Jahan Dotson's worth a 3rd-round pick at this point. I believed he was going to bounce back because the quarterback situation in Washington was, I know Howell made some plays, but he was just so inaccurate and just so inconsistent to play on time. I just felt like with things being better, Dotson would play better. But at this point, like, he's nowhere to be found. He's playing. Like, he had an opportunity when A.J. Brown went down. There was a game where he kind of had to be their number 1 wide receiver because Smith and Brown were both out. But he has 6 catches on the year on 12 targets and 35 yards. And his yards per route run is so low that if you just like take out all filters, because you have to do that to get him to show up in the stat columns, he is 171st out of 174 wide receivers in yards per route run. He is just nowhere to be found. Somewhere to be found, though, is Britton Covey, their return man, it's almost hardly worth talking about, but they've thrown him some bubble screens and stuff. He's caught him. He was rated really low, 63 to a 67. Moving on, one positive for this offense is Jordan Mailata, who is unfortunately hurt now, so it's not even all positive, but this dude just keeps getting better and better and better. I don't know where his development stops, but the arrow continues to be pointing up on him. He's allowed 8 pressures in 5 games. That's like nothing, basically. And just 1 sack allowed. He has PFF's highest pass block grade in the NFL this year. He's been insane. Now, it's in 5 games. That's why it's only a +1, and he's already very highly rated, obviously. Unfortunately, he got hurt. They got to get him back out there as soon as possible, but he just continues to be so good. But let's flip over to the defense. Their defense has actually played better as of late. Vic Fangio is starting to get these guys to settle in a little bit, and I love what they've got going on in the secondary right now. But unfortunately, their defensive line and their pass rush just hasn't been what they hoped for. Thomas Booker has come in as a rotational guy, a pickup, was drafted by Houston. He's eaten up some run defense snaps on early downs. He's done some good work there, but not too much else to say there. But one of the big additions this offseason, Bryce Huff, has done effectively nothing for them. I can't fully explain it. If it's just the scheme change, leaving Salah's defense where they run a lot of stunts and let him kind of put his hand in the dirt. I don't have a great explanation for this, but you just really haven't even noticed Bryce Huff for the Eagles. His pressure rate's like below 10%, which is just putrid. I'm a big Bryce Huff fan, but it has been very discouraging to see kind of, if you were hesitant on him being worth the money, it was the undrafted background, the lack of size, being in kind of a very limited rotational role for the Jets where he was hyper efficient. He's been ripped out of that environment, and he's kind of just a guy right now. So that's been really tough to see. He's got to come down for it, -2. Down to a 78. Now, he did have a sack, 4 pressures last week, so hopefully that's a sign of things to come, but that's not enough to save him from dropping from what he's put on tape this year. But then into the second level and out to the secondary, like, things are definitely pretty good there for the Eagles. They've really found a nice linebacker duo here. I love this combination of dudes. Still very much unproven and a long ways to go in terms of the ratings and stuff. But Zach Bond going up 4, really making the full-time conversion to off-ball linebacker, getting picked up by the Saints. And then Nakobe Dean finally getting a starting opportunity and staying healthy here in Philadelphia. He gets a +1, 71 to a 72. But Bond is just so diverse. He has that pass rushing background, so he's been a good blitzer, but he's got good size, really good at getting off blocks. He's got great speed. I mean, he's a very complete athlete, and his skill set is honestly very complete. It's just a matter of like, all right, so he's played, 5-6 games at off-ball linebacker. He's checked a lot of boxes. Hasn't been shown up quite as much in recent weeks. The first 3 weeks, he really burst onto the scene and everybody was talking about him. Not so much anymore, but it's not that he's playing bad. He just isn't standing out as much. But yeah, Bond's been sweet. And then, Nakobe Dean, a lot of splash plays. Like some of the blitzes he had against the Giants. He had a great game against the Saints week 3 with 5 defensive stops. It's just good to see him just out there making plays. I think this could just be the beginning for Nakobe Dean. He's doubled his career snaps this season. He's in year 3. He's played 6 games and he's doubled his career snaps. So, only room to go up for Nakobe Dean. He's still had some missed tackles and some blown coverage assignments. It hasn't been all perfect, but he's definitely been a very solid LB2 or 1B next to Zach Bond. And even if both of these guys have had some scattered, inconsistent moments throughout the year, they've been much better than what they've had, and they feel good enough about these guys to release Devin White, who, we don't need to talk about Devin White, but he's gone. But where I'm really thrilled with this Eagles defense is with these 2 young corners, which, we all felt like the Eagles stole these players in the draft. Quinyon Mitchell, the best corner in this draft, falls into the 20s, and then Cooper DeJean somehow available in the 2nd round. And for these guys to both land in just a dream scheme for their skill sets. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, proved he can play man coverage at the Senior Bowl and stuff, but at Toledo played a lot of that Fangio-style top-down zone, just so brilliant when it comes to that type of stuff. He's had I feel like a couple drop pick opportunities. Well, he had a drop pick 6 against somebody, and then he had another one where he was lining up for a pick, and then the safety, freaking Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, comes and also goes for the ball and takes Quinyon Mitchell out of it. So unfortunately, he hasn't had the interception production. But he does have 6 pass breakups on the year. He had some miscommunications, blown assignments, types of stuff lead to some big plays in the first couple of weeks, but those have been cleaned up recently. He's just been a phenomenal fit on the outside. And I love that he gets to play outside because heading into the year, things were jumbled, and I was a little worried that things weren't going to play out the way that it felt like they should. Because they were starting Mitchell as a slot corner, and then they were playing Avonte Maddox while DeJean was technically healthy. Wasn't sure if DeJean was going to crack the slot corner lineup. It was just kind of jumbled, but now it's like things have settled in the way that they were always supposed to, with Quinyon on the outside and Cooper DeJean in a Fangio-style defense as the star nickel role is so perfect. In the last couple of weeks, my eyes have just been glued on him, man. He flows through traffic so well as a zone defender. He's breaking downhill the second he sees it. His trigger, his acceleration is so phenomenal from the slot. He's keeping everything in front of him. He was targeted 3 times last week, all kind of underneath, and just allowed 4 receptions on it. I think his PFF coverage grade was 87. He's been balling out in the slot. So these 2 guys getting to play in the right spots it is a big reason why this defense is settling in and playing better. So I love that. Those 2 together could have been kind of the super stud combo as well for this team. But then Reed Blankenship deserves some credit too. He's a risk taker. He has some weeks where he gives up some big plays and finds himself out of position. He's had probably a few too many missed tackles for your liking this year at 16%. But some of the picks he has are just crazy instinctive plays. I thought the one he had on Jordan Love in Brazil was really impressive, where he kind of triggered he was playing center field and he triggered on it, kind of worked around a 6'6" tight end to come down with a pick. It was just a really impressive play. And then he had another really impressive interception against Derek Carr and the Saints in kind of a similar fashion. So he deserves to go up just because he's a freaking playmaker back there, man. And even if it's not all perfect, you got to appreciate a guy that has the instincts to take those risks and make those game-changing interceptions. And it's not like he's some liability in coverage. It's just like there will be some weeks where he's a little bit out of position. His longest reception accredited to his coverage this year is 21 yards. It's not like nothing. It's not like detrimental to the team. You know what I'm saying? But let's get to our last team here, the New York Giants. It's actually a pretty positive spin on the Giants here because even though they're struggling, we know that they were coming from a very low place. They do have a lot of young players. This draft, especially, is looking really encouraging for the Giants, and I really do think there's something there for them to build upon, even if it's been frustrating to see this offense stall out as of late. But the super stud of the first trimester for this series for the Giants is going to be Drew Phillips. God, he looks good, man, and he looks good in a position that I would not have projected him to play in the slot. Now, I love Drew Phillips as an outside corner. I had a second-round grade on him. I think he was, my CB 6 or 7? A lot of people said I was too high on him when I did my top 10 cornerback rankings. He ends up going in the 3rd round. Clearly should have gone a little bit higher than that. He has just insane route squeeze. That trait I talk about where if your job as a coverage player is to keep the elastic band tight and the second any space starts to open up, he's able to snap it back close. The reactionary quickness, the acceleration, the hip fluidity, he's just sticky in coverage, man. He's been all over guys from the slot. And slot corner is a position that is one of the hardest positions for a rookie to play. So he's been targeted 15 times this season, 11 receptions, but for just 4 yards a reception. That's, again, from a slot role where you are guaranteed to allow receptions because of your alignment and how with RPOs and screens and underneath throws, and picks and all that stuff, you're going to allow receptions, but to be right on these guys, bringing them down consistently, 4 yards of reception from the slot. Are you kidding me? He's also been a contributor in run defense. He has 13 defensive stops this year, which is a very high number considering he's only played 193 snaps this year. He's been on and off the field a little bit. He got a little banged up, but that takes me to the last thing I want to say on him is my main and only really concern on Drew Phillips was the tackling, where he missed 25% of his tackles in college, and he's a more slender player. That's why I was a little surprised when they drafted him to be a slot. Clearly, it was a very good eye by them that he could clean that up and be very good from that spot because he always had the friskiness to do it. It was just the dude could not wrap up at Kentucky, but he had 2 missed tackles against Washington, and that's it. He's only missed 6.9% of his tackle attempts this year. So he's been an absolute baller for them and a great draft pick in the 3rd round. And we've got plenty of rookies to talk about here, but we do have some negatives to talk about first. Daniel Jones, I pumped the brakes on lowering him last year because he was really playing poor, but the offensive line was just a complete non-starter. And it was hard to put too much on Daniel Jones there. And he really did have a solid 2022 season. So heading into this year, it's not even that he's been that bad, but he hasn't been as good as he was in 2022. So I do feel like he has to come down. He's still just a very timid passer. The pocket presence is still very poor. I did think he was impressive in that Seattle game, but beyond that, he kind of just has the feel of a backup quarterback, right? So 75, just a little too high. He's going to get them through this season and probably going to play better than he has the last couple of weeks at points in the year. But yeah, I definitely felt he had to come down a little bit. And then Devin Singletary, same deal. I like Devin Singletary. 80 just felt a little high, especially for what he's doing for the Giants. Now, this did happen last year where the first half of the year he was super inefficient, and then he kind of rediscovered his elusiveness and explosiveness. Obviously, Giants fans would love to see that, or maybe they wouldn't love to see that because you're already seeing that from Tyrone Tracy, who's a much more exciting young player with more of a future on this team. He's been impressive. I kind of took a 1 foot in, 1 foot out approach on Tyrone Tracy because I liked what we saw, but his vision was very much still in development. He was 24 years old. He was this converted wide receiver, transfer to running back and all this stuff. some people really believed in him and really liked him, and a credit to those that did. I feel like I kind of took the coward's way out on some of these outlier types of prospects at running back this year, like Tracy and Bucky Irving. And it's not like I was a hater on those guys, but both of those dudes have really looked the part, with kind of a weird college background, if you will, with Bucky being so tiny. But anyway, Tracy just looks the part, man. Like he's got elusiveness. He's made guys miss left and right, and he's actually like run through arm tackles, had really good yards after contact. He's had explosive runs. Just a very promising young player that's getting more and more touches every week, seemingly. And you love, too, that he does have that receiving background. You know, they can line him up out at a wide receiver. I think it was the Seahawks game. He went out and caught a slant from a wide receiver spot. That's just normal for him. He did it for 5 years at Iowa and a year at Purdue. So really excited to see kind of where the ceiling is with him. It's very high, assuming the vision and his consistency can keep up. But Malik Neighbors got to come up, of course. I mean, he's been as advertised. It fell off with the injury. But he's just a special player, man. And to be an 81 rated player, according to my system with rookies, like that's through 5 games. That's a huge testament to his ability, his movement skills, especially. Like he's just an alien compared to most receivers in the league. And he's got size. He's got the ability to win tough catches. You know, the kind of like back-to-back touchdowns that he had, showing some versatility in the red zone against Cleveland was probably my highlight of the year for him. They haven't really been able to get back to the success they had with him in the first month, at least in the one game back against Philly. So I really want to see them, you know, lean all the way back into Malik because he's a special player. But then rookie tight end Theo Johnson. So I think a lot of Giants fans will be interested in my thoughts on Theo because he was such a weird player. I have nothing against Theo Johnson, but I was just so surprised when he tested as well as he did because I had already completed his eval, and he just looked so slow to me without the testing numbers on film. He looked stiff. It looked like he took forever to get into his breaks. And, he got a lot of draft hype and all that stuff. He goes in the 4th round of the Giants, and he's playing pretty solid. He's getting a +3 from me. I still don't think he moves quite like his testing numbers would indicate, where he was like the most athletic testing tight end ever. I do think the long speed looks good. When they get him on crossers, there was also like a fumble or a pick 6 or something where he was in pursuit, and you could see like with the long speed, like he was moving. So like I've seen the speed show up for sure. Not necessarily like dicing dudes up with his routes or anything like that, or making these crazy catches over the middle of the field, showing great body control or anything like that. But he's gotten involved with the offense. He's got 11 receptions on 16 targets. He's had a couple drops, and he did get hit with an offensive pass interference in the red zone for what probably should have been his first touchdown. I mean, it was a push-off, but it was the type of push-off that gets called, push-off that gets called maybe 10, 15% of the time. So that was a bummer for Theo Johnson in the last game against the Eagles. But I think he looks all right. I'm not going to like keep going down this path of like being this big Theo Johnson hater. I just, I gave my opinion on what I saw at Penn State, and we're just going to keep evaluating him, the Giants, now moving forward. But let's talk about the offensive line a little bit. Josh Azudu is going to get a +1. I know Giants fans are like cringing at the thought of that. He stepped in when Andrew Thomas went down for the year, which is just a brutal injury. But he held up okay against the Eagles in the second half of that game against the Eagles. And I think it's somewhat notable that he's the guy they want to go to at left tackle over Evan Neal. I do have a lot of respect for Carmen Brasillo, and he's done a good job with this offensive line. So there could be something there. We're talking about going from a 62 to a 63. I'm not particularly optimistic, but we'll see, I suppose. 3rd round pick pedigree, like there's some traits to work with there, certainly. But then at right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor continues to just steadily climb. It feels like the last 3 years of studs and duds, Jermaine Illuminor has gone from like, +1, +2, like every single week. Is he's kind of a studs and duds folklore type of hero on multiple different teams now. But yeah, he's just been really solid for the Giants. He's been a godsend. I still can't believe his contract was as cheap as it was. There's a lot of tackles in the league making more money than he has that have less of a track record. And he's just extremely solid. Not perfect, but just very, very solid. And then I had one more note on the offense for Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, he's got a bazillion targets. I've got him as a 75 overall. Is he really doing anything that would tell you he's better than that? I don't know. And I don't even think Giants fans would argue that that's a bad rating for him. It's just funny because that is a relatively low rating for a guy that is fourth in the NFL in receptions, but he's 87th in PFF receiving grade. And what's even more crazy is he is 91st in yards per route run, which you would think for a guy getting that many targets is naturally just going to be a little bit higher. But that just goes to show you like just how inefficient he has been with his targets. So just because he's getting force fed the ball, I didn't feel the need to boost him because I haven't really seen anything new with Wan'Dale Robinson. He just happens to be getting absolutely fed right now. But then for the defense, I did have to create this Elijah Chapman. He's a fun player. He's 6 foot, 278 pounds. Those guys don't really grow on trees. In fact, the only 6 foot, 278 pound defensive tackle I can think of is Aaron Donald. Obviously, Chapman's not Aaron Donald, but same kind of underlying concept where when you're shorter and stocky and really strong. This guy had 32 bench reps, which is pretty good. He's got a good first step. He ran like a 4.78 out of SMU. You put him in between a gap and have him shoot gaps and play as a shade of a guard, and you can be a disruptive player. He's been just that against the run, and as a pass rusher, he's had some really fun moments getting into the backfield making plays. So they seem to have found something there undrafted, as well as hitting on a lot of these rookies. We've already talked about 4 of them, and we still got to talk about Tyler Nubin. But some of these young edge rushers are playing well. That's one of the bigger points of optimism for the Giants is that Kayvon Thibodeau, it looks better to me. He did get hurt, but the last 2 weeks, I feel like, I think he had 5 pressures and a sack, more or less, in the last couple of games. So the production's been good, but it's how he's getting that production. It's not like the first couple of years where he's just speed to bend, effort, sacks, late wins, that kind of stuff. He's had like quicker, more effective wins. The quality of pressure has been better on him. And he's breaking out some his hand usage looks so much better. He's setting up moves, showing a little bit more finesse that he hasn't in years past. It's very encouraging that he's learned okay, I can't just rely on my physical traits as he did at Oregon, as he did really in the first couple of years. I think Brian Burns has probably been very good for him to learn some of this stuff. And I want to see him back healthy as soon as possible because I really liked Thibodeau coming out, and it's good to see that growth here in year 3. And then Azeez Ojulari as well. This is more like he's healthy and he's playing and he's producing. Now he has like 4.5 sacks on the year or something like that. Some of them are cleanup sacks and stuff, but he's defending the run better than he ever has, and he's been a solid pass rusher. Him as a 3, I'm totally cool with, and he's been a nice piece, and he's stepped up all right with Thibodeau out as well. I don't think he's ever going to be a high-end starter or anything like that. I just don't think he's traitsy enough for that at this point, but he can still be a very nice complementary rotational third. And then Micah McFadden's going to come out. He came out the gate on fire, screaming at the ball, making plays. He's cooled off since, but he's still a very nice player. Just kind of the more reps he racks up, he kind of steadily climbs in these ratings. He's a risk taker, and I think that's why you see a little bit more polarizing results from him. But yeah, decent enough player. But then we'll wrap things up here with Tyler Nubin, the last rookie here to talk about. He's just smashing dudes, just absolutely smashing dudes. He's been stable in coverage. He hasn't made a lot of plays in coverage, but he also hasn't been getting picked on, which is pretty good for a safety. But his ability to come down in the box and wreck big running backs, lay the lumber. I mean, I'm a Gopher fan. I don't quite remember seeing that from Tyler Nubin. So that's been just really fun to see. That side of his game is just being more of a kind of a high-end presence around the box. It's not that you couldn't play him down in the box or that he didn't do that and isn't a good tackler and all that stuff, but just bringing a little bit more of a play strength enforcer element to the table that I didn't necessarily think we'd see from him. So that's been really fun to see, and he's just a really heady player. Even if he's not the best athlete, he's pretty good at getting into the right spot to not give up big plays in coverage. So yeah, he's off to a very good start as well. So you can see the Giants aren't winning games, but at the end of the day, they still have a coach I believe in and some young players that are stepping up. So I hope they can continue to build upon this and get back to relevancy for the Giants. you could be in a worse spot. You could be the Panthers or the Raiders or maybe the Cowboys. I don't know who you'd rather be right now. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments down below. Would you rather be a Giants fan or would you rather be a Cowboys fan right now? It's an interesting choice, but that's going to do it for the NFC East. We are going to finish up the NFC tomorrow, hopefully, and then we're going to do this rodeo again next week with the AFC. I think it's I've run out of time. These videos have taken a little bit longer than I originally anticipated, so this is probably the way we're going to have to do it in the future, is breaking these up a little bit more. Maybe, got a little over-ambitious with how much I could get done in a single week here. But I hope you guys are enjoying Studs and Duds. Please do hit that like button if you are. It really helps me out. And make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss upcoming episodes. But we'll see you soon. Peace out.